All right. So this is like the ninth time I've tried to record this video, and I'm kind of at my wit's end. I feel like this video is kind of cursed. But what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna just do um, a full one through of all of the weapons that I'm going to be talking about, and no script, no nothing. I just want to get this over with at this point because I spent weeks trying to record this video, and yeah, every single time something goes wrong. So, enough of my belly aching. Welcome to my video. So, um, I went out and collected every single Incarnon weapon out there, and I wanted to form a kind of good idea of how each and every one of them plays and how much I like them or dislike them. I'll be talking about what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, what I like about them, what I don't like about them. Generally, just it will be a biased view of each and every one of these weapons. Um, to make sure that my testing was at least somewhat structured, I did come up with some rules for myself. One of the first being for most of the melee weapons, I'm not going to be talking about them. While testing them, I found out that I'm not that big of a melee person. I look forward to the changes in the Abyss of the Gap coming up. But for the most part, if you enjoy the melee weapon itself, then go ahead and pick up the Incarnon because it's just a strict upgrade. That being said, here are some of the other rules. All of the testing I've done and that I'll be showing on screen is from Circulus on Lua, with Conjunction Survival, level 180 to 200 on Steel Path. I put at least 3 Forma in each of the firearms, and I'll talk about the average kills across 3 runs, but that's not what I'll be basing my scores on. I'll be basing them on how much I enjoy each of the weapons. Um, Warframe wise, I used Revenant with Silence, and I don't use any damage buffs, no grouping abilities, no Rivens, no pets, and I must try to at least kill the Thrax at the 5 minute mark before leaving. Um, so, once again, this is a very biased review of each and every weapon out there. It's not by any means comprehensive or conclusive, any of my testing. It's just that I did the testings to make sure that I got a good understanding of how much I liked each weapon. So if you agree or disagree, go ahead and leave that in the comments. If you have a build that works on a specific warframe, good for you. I would love to hear about it. All of these builds are done to be generic, meaning that I could just pick up and go. Doesn't matter the warframe, doesn't matter the mission. I can pick it up and go whenever. If I wanted to make a series of videos regarding on what specific hyper builds that will make each weapon sing, that's not going to happen. That's going to take way too much time, and this one has already consumed so much of my life. Um, so to start off, I'm going to be talking about the original 3 firearms: the Laetum, the Phenmor, and the Felarx. These are the first ones that you'll be able to get via the Angels of Zariman, or at least the 3 that were originally available, I should say. So let's start off with the first one you can historically get access to, being the Laetum. It's a semi-automatic pistol, pinpoint accurate, very easy to handle, decently high recoil, and it charges his Incarnons rather quickly. Just 1 or 2, and you'll get a decent chunk of your charge. The Incarnon fires a stream of exploding projectiles that basically ruins the day of anyone that they encounter. The Laetum, I mean, is easy to use, has moderate AoE, and so I'm gonna every now and again get some interruption by sound. I'm gonna ignore those because um, if I keep stopping my recording for each and every one that comes up, I'm just going to have another travesty on my hands. Anyways, so Laetum, fairly easy to use, moderate AoE, reasonable charge rate, and generous incarnate ammo pool. The only real con, I would say, is that this weapon has very slow projectiles in its incarnate form. Yeah, a very solid piece of kit, very easy to use, and across 3 runs got an average of 323 kills. And I'm going to be using this as a benchmark, so I'm going to start off by placing it in the B tier. The weapons will go be better or worse based off. Like I'll be basing the all secondary weapons based off the Laetum going forward. The Phenmor. So this was one of my favorite weapons for the longest time. This is primarily because it's a semi-automatic rifle that turns into a Gatling gun. It does incredibly high amounts of damage, and it has excellent synergy with Zata's Whisper. But putting all of that aside, right? I'm testing them without like any damage buffs, any Warframe buffs, or things like that. So, yeah, it has a decent fire rate, has really high damage, and its incarnate ammo pool is gigantic. I mean, you're firing a bloody Gatling gun. Some of the weaknesses are that it has a really, really fat amount of recoil. It has no base AoE whatsoever. And its transformation animation is one of the longest, if not the longest. And I believe that's based off of reload speed. During testing, the Phenmor was able to bring in about 333 kills on average. It's a very solid weapon, and it's going to be the benchmark for all of the primary weapons going forward. And it's going to sit in the B tier. Last of the original 3 I'll be talking about is the Felarx. The Felarx is a unique case. It's a weapon that's fairly niche compared to the other 2 because, well, let's just say almost nothing can survive a single volley from this weapon. Initially, it'll have a fairly low fire rate, but one of its nodes that you can pick will be able to increase the fire rate based off of the number of shells you've loaded in from reloading. Anyways, so let me try to put this into context. I only use this weapon against Archons and Lephantis. I don't use this in any other content. One of the biggest reasons is because it has something that a lot of other weapons do suffer from, and I'll be talking about it. So I'm going to call it suffering from success. That means it does so much damage that it's actually very difficult to charge the Incarnon form. So when I try to charge the Incarnate on normal enemies, they tend not to be tanky enough to, survive. So, well, one pellet does not charge the Incarnate very much. Speaking about the Incarnate, it fires waves of infinite body piercing shots. Very good at clearing groups of enemies. But it has the lowest Incarnate ammo pool of all of them, and also it's fairly unreliable, especially since it has single shell loading. So I guess if I was to split it into pros and cons, probably one of the highest DPSs in the game, in terms of burst and whatnot. I don't think there are very many things that can survive a single volley from this weapon. And its Incarnate has decent AoE. But the cons kind of pile up. It suffers from success. It has a abysmal initial firing rate. At least the Incarnate does. Probably one of the slowest in the game. It uses individual shell loading, which is something I just detest. And its recoil is, that's just another thing to tack onto it. The Felarx is a niche weapon. It falls under the category of support weapons in my mind. And let's see. On average, during testing, it averaged 212 kills. It's not the greatest. but like because it does do one job very, very well, I'm gonna put it in the C tier. All right, let's get rid of this row. This is the first week of Incarnons, which will be covering the Braton, the Lato, the Paris, and the Kunai. So the Braton is the first rifle that most people will come into contact with. And once you get the Incarnon adapter, it can handle Steel Path without any issues. It becomes a crit monster that, well, you don't need any real buffs to kind of make into a monster, you know? It is a very good and solid primary weapon by itself. And in its Incarnon, if you've ever wanted the Trunma or liked using the Trunma, it's basically a better Trunma. That being said, it's a fully automatic, slow-firing, explosive shell weapon. It has a small AoE and does sizable amounts of damage. So, I mean, it has a good Incarnon ammo pool, good fire rate, good damage, has a little bit of AoE, picks up a little bit of kills here and there. One of the biggest things, and this is probably where it becomes a little bit controversial, is that it's a little plain Jane. So I'm going to be judging it on how fun it was as well, right? And it's fairly boring to me. It can handle just about any content the game has to offer, and but it's overall fairly unremarkable. From testing, it was able to take out 276 enemies on average, and it's good and simple. So I'm going to actually plop it into the B tier as well, just because it's just simple, it's reliable, it's middle of the road, it's inoffensive. The Lato, same thing with the Braton, first pistol that most people will ever interact with. And DE did a great job giving it a facelift with the Incarnons. So the Incarnon adapter makes the base form a high crit weapon, gives it high damage, makes it very easy to charge as well, because, well, you only need 1 or 2 shots to really get enough to be usable. The Incarnon makes this weapon into a ricocheting monster. You can clear out rooms rather quickly. You shoot one guy, it does the same amount of damage to 2 other people on the like within line of sight. So, I mean, high damage hits multiple targets. Pretty good. However, it's very simple. It's not flashy. And the Incarnate ammo pool is quite restrictive, so you constantly need to charge this thing. This weapon was surprisingly effective. It isn't the coolest thing around, but it's simple, it's elegant, and it can handle almost every foe out there. During tests, the Lato got an average of 324 kills, which was quite surprising to me. I was expecting a much lower number, especially after testing the Braton. But due to its nature as an easy to use and reliable powerhouse, I'm giving it a, it's going to sit pretty in B as well. So this is kind of be like my bridging of like the generations here. So you can kind of see what's middle of the pack and what isn't. And let's move on to the Paris. I think the Paris always performed really well. It's the original bow. It was able to handle single targets at a distance quite reasonably, and the Incarnon kind of just like covers all of its weaknesses. It gave it a good amount of damage, so good that you don't need a Riven in the Steel Path to really kind of rip things to death. That just came out really poorly, but anyways, rip things to pieces. But when you turn it into its Incarnon, it fires blade beams that horizontally sweep through the battlefield with infinite body punch through. It does insane amounts of damage. It has a very reasonable Incarnon charge rate, and it has a fairly wide AoE. For some reason, it might just be my setup, but it does have a little bit of difficulty with some of the more tankier foes out there. And it also, like the Lato, has a fairly low incarnate ammo pool. So it's a wide sweeping AoE weapon that can push up to millions of damage in a single shot. So there's not much more that you can want. In fact, it performed quite well during testing, being 374 kills on average, and quite easily outcompetes everything else that we've seen so far. And that's why I'm putting it as the first A tier weapon. It's definitely not something you want to sleep on. The Kunai. Well, the Kunai are a bit hit or miss depending on what you're looking for. It's going to be another support weapon like the Felarx, except it doesn't quite compete for the same niche. Um, have you ever had those enemies that are a little bit spicy? They move really fast, they're really annoying to deal with. Well, the Incarnon of the Kunai fires head-seeking projectiles. Like, it sounds amazing to use, it feels amazing to use, and it does a pretty decent amount of damage. Um, However, it's quite terrible at clearing large groups of enemies. Uh, Pros, very consistent and effortless headshots. I think this is the most number of headshots I've ever gotten in any run, especially in percentages. It has a very high rate of fire and it's very easy to charge. It has a The cons are, well, it has fairly low incarnate ammo pool. You'll constantly be needing to recharge this thing. Um, it can't deal with hordes very well. And in order to maximize the amount of damage, you need to swap back and forth from your primary to this weapon because that will give it a large crit bonus and a crit damage bonus. Um, and since it's like kind of clunky, okay, during testing it got 229 kills. It's not the greatest out there. Um, Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to use your primary weapon, you're going to swap to this for a couple seconds, take out a tankier foe, and then that's it. You're going to swap back. The issue is that you're going to have to charge it every now and again, which will slow down and make your gameplay a lot more clunky. But because of the way it feels, the way that it sounds, like I can't, in good conscience, put it any further than C tier. I love the flavor, but its performance is fairly unremarkable. It's going below the Felarx, and it's going to keep sinking below there as the list goes on. Okay, so now we're into week 2. The Boar. So week 2 is kind of weird. Before I get on to the Boar, because it's like the newest of the Incarnons. So week 2, we're going to be covering the Boar, the Gorgon, the Gammacor, and the Angstrum. So the Boar is a fully automatic shotgun with a very reasonable damage output, especially after acquiring an Incarnon adapter. Its Incarnon form fires 3 tracking beams, so you don't gotta aim this thing, and it chains onto other enemies and does an insane number of damage or amount of damage. So it's kind of like the big brother of the Ocucore, though you need a lot more work to get there. So it has an insane damage output. It can handle single targets fairly reasonably, but it does suffer from success, just like the Felarx. Meaning, once again, it takes quite a long time or quite a bit of effort to fully charge this weapon, especially if you don't run into that many tanky foes. So, I mean, it handles groups of foes with ease. You can see that on the screen now. And the base form can handle tankier enemies. So it's kind of got the Felarx thing going for it. And the ammo pool for the Incarnon, fairly reasonable. Biggest issue, suffers from success. It's very difficult to charge. Very good all-rounder. Can handle almost every form of content without too much of a hiccup. During testing, you remember when I said the Paris was able to outperform everything we've seen so far? This is going to be the first one to kind of kick the bucket there. So 424 enemies on average. This weapon was able to beam through so many things so quickly without any effort. Um, it's powerful, it's easy to use, it's a very flashy weapon, it's quite fun. So I'm putting it in the A tier above the Paris. Now, if it was easier to charge, it would be an easy S, but because it's such a pain in the butt, it's going in the A. So I'm a bit of a like S purist, unless I really vouch for the weapon or it just outperforms everything by like a landslide. It like A is probably the furthest that most of these weapons are going to get, and same with F. Unless I just had an abysmal time using the weapon, that's where like most weapons won't make it past D. Um, it's kind of why I'm not talking about the melee weapons. Is because I'm not a fan of melee, and it was an abysmal time, and I don't wanna. I don't want to do them in an injustice. There we go. All right. So next up is the Gorgon. So when the weapon released, or at least when the Incarnate adapter for the Gorgon released, it was probably one of the worst by far. It was easy to charge, but it fired delayed time explosives that you had to charge before firing. So you had to charge it, then you had to wait, and then it exploded. So that was pretty terrible. Now, apparently it got quite a number of changes. It's surprisingly solid. It's very easy to charge, and the Incarnate is fully automatic now instead of being charged. It's slow firing, but it creates big blasts of damage. And I don't have any more complaints about the Gorgon anymore. If you have the unique augment mod for the Gorgon, it also makes getting headshots and just turning one person's day into a nightmare very easy. So, extremely easy to charge weapon. Massive AoE, has a moderate sized crit range. The Incarnate is probably one of the slower firing ones out there. So it's surprisingly strong. On average, it was able to shatter 336 enemies. And this is on the steel path too, so it's gonna be on the higher end of B tier. That's what I'm gonna put it. A lot of people were looking forward to it, so it's good to see that it's kind of back into the swing of things. Gammacor. I mean, it's a beam weapon, and it's Incarnon fires lobs of grouping explosions. So it has a secondary fire of the plinks or the tenet plinks, but you can fire it in rapid succession, grouping lots and lots of enemies and then blowing them up. Um, However, here's the biggest issue. Unfortunately, this weapon suffers from success. It does so much single target damage that it'll easily just slice through trash mobs without any issue. So you need something tankier to charge off of. However, as a supporting tool, if you like want a grouping ability and you don't want to be in the focus school of Vazarin, or you don't want to bring a Warframe or subsume an ability to group enemies, then the Gammacor can do that. It's I don't know, it's a nice solid support weapon. I mean, in testing, it didn't do too bad either. It was able to evaporate an average of 330 foes. So it's also getting a high B for me. I'm going to put it below the Gorgon because simply as put, the Gorgon was easier to use. Oh, did I say what the Gorgon got? 336 on average. So not bad, not bad. Oh, I did say it. I remember saying it now. Anyways, next up, the Angstrum. So this is one of the weapons I'm going to highly advocate for. And before I say anything, I'm going to put it right here. So, if you don't like the whole headshot mechanic, the Angstrum just bypasses that altogether. You just need body shots to charge this weapon. It has it's basically a micro rocket firing weapon, and as long as you land your shots on the body, anywhere on the body, you'll charge this weapon. And rather quickly too. Its Incarnon form is turns it into a automatic pistol that shoots bouncing projectiles. So it bouncing and seeking projectiles. Let me make that clear. It doesn't do the most damage out there, but it's also probably one of the easiest Incarnons to, use. Because you just pull it out and you charge it by just shooting someone in the body. Also, because it's a bouncing projectile, technically it can hit the same enemy multiple times, which is very rare for most projectiles in Warframe. So in short, it's a very, very, very good weapon. Like, listen to all these pros. Extremely easy to charge, good Incarnate ammo pool, great crit rate, good damage, and it has weak seeking on the projectiles. Like, it's not the levels of the Kunai, but we'll see another weapon that's very similar that kind of blows this out of the water fairly soon. Also, the bounce velocity is kind of insane, so if I was to say anything bad about this weapon, it's that. It bounces erratically, and it's kind of annoying to deal with sometimes. Yeah, so very high A. It's going to be very hard to outcompete this thing. Performance-wise, average of 401 kills. It's not as high as the Boar, but it's also doesn't suffer from success. In fact, like, it's very easy to be just successful with this weapon. Very high A. Very easy to use. If I put more time into this, I bet this could become a monster. Okay, so that's the end of week 2. So let me delete this row. Okay, so week 3. So during week 3, we're going to be covering the Latron, the Furis, and the Strun. So, the Latron. It has an upgrade that lets you strip armor permanently. Permanently strip 20% of armor on a Pierce status proc. And it is, in its base form, a Pierce weapon. Its Incarnon form has a Pierce damage type explosion. So, you want to have armor strip on a weapon and not care about it on your Warframe or your operator? Latron's there for you. I like it. I can't begin to say how much I enjoyed just stripping armor with this thing. It feels really good to use, and with just 5 shots on anything, it loses all of its armor. Pros: ranged armor strip, high damage, great AoE, good crit. So the only demerit it has to it is the fact that in its Incarnon form, it fires a bouncing projectile that explodes in an AoE. But because there's no seeking on it, it's extremely unreliable. So you kind of just want to use it as a rocket launcher more than a bouncing projectile. Sometimes you'll score extra hits. Most of the time you won't. So, very, very good support style weapon. In testing, the Latron pierced through an average of 376 enemies. Based off of what I like, I think I would want to put it in the S tier, but it's not a universal powerhouse. So it's going high on the A tier. It's easy, it's not too bad to charge either, so it doesn't suffer from success. The Furis. It's a fully automatic machine pistol. What? How do I describe the Incarnon form? Did you like the fourth ability of Wisp? Like, do you want it to do like have modded specific damage types? Do you want to use it on other warframes? That's kind of what the Fierce Incarnon does. It's easy to charge, and its Incarnon fires a lance of plasma in the direction you're pointing at. So, easy to charge, infinite body punch through, decent AoE, consistent damage. What's not to like? Well, if you want to maximize its damage, I haven't done the testing for it, but I'm using the setup that requires you to be below 40% crit rate. It struggles with tankier foes. That's a given, I think. However, one of the worst bits is that it's blinding. It's almost impossible to see with this. So if you're using this weapon, you probably want to put in a color that might help you see a bit better. Very consistent damage. Very aesthetically pleasing. During testing, it was able to roast an average of 333 enemies. Performance wise, it's a bit middle of the road, and that's why I'm just gonna pop it right there. The last of week 3 is the Strun. I don't like it. It's a single loading shotgun. The Incarnon form, something is off with the Incarnon form. It feels like you're using a super soaker, a water gun for those who don't know. The Incarnon form is a high impact explosion that deals quite a lot of damage. It's fairly reliable. But okay, let's just go with the good things first. Good damage, good AoE, good crit. No complaints there. But it has single shell loading. If it had an upgrade that made it not single shell loading, it would probably like go so far up in the ranks. It feels terrible to use. Like the damage is there, but it feels like I'm using a bloody water gun. And of all weapons to suffer from success, why does it have to be another shell loading gun? Um, I don't like this weapon. If something just feels off about it, it doesn't fill a niche like the Felarx, it's inconvenient to reload, it's inconvenient to charge, it does a solid amount of damage, it can compete with the rest quite readily. So it would have been in B tier due to its numbers alone, but because of how much I don't like it, I'm putting it in D tier. Numbers wise, let me just find that real quick. I forgot to add that to my notes for some reason. Numbers wise, the Strun was able to super soak 347 enemies on average over the course of 3 runs. It's nothing to sneeze at, but I don't like this weapon at all. I'm just scrolling through my notes right now, so it's going in the D tier. It's not a good weapon. I don't like it. It doesn't deserve to be an F, but like it's an awful weapon. Or at least it feels awful in my hands. Let me like I'm sure someone else will disagree with me, but something just feels off about this run. Okay, enough about this run. Week 4. So delete that row. Okay, week 4. We have the Bronco, the Lex, the Boltor, and the Ceramic Dagger. This will be one of the 3 melee weapons I'll be covering because of its special properties. Okay. Quite honestly, very surprised at how good the Bronco felt to use. It's a little hard to charge because it suffers from success. It seems to be a running thing with shotgun style weapons. But how do I sell this? Remember the Lato Incarnon? Now imagine if you could do that with a shotgun. That's what the Bronco is. Every pellet that the Incarnon fires will ricochet up to 2 or 3 other targets and can almost instantly clear a room. So where the Lato was a little simple, you see numbers everywhere with the Bronco. I was surprised at how good this weapon felt to use. It has massive ricochet, it has really good damage, it has good crit. It does suffer a little bit from success, and unless you enjoy using the Bronco, it is still the Bronco. I'm not the biggest fan of the Bronco, so it's going to affect that a little bit. And its incarnate ammo pool is just as low as the Latos. So, very capable of handling enemies on the steel path. Uh, I'd imagine it's near impossible to charge anywhere else, though. Like, if you were to bring this onto any normal mission that isn't on the steel path, it wouldn't be able to charge anywhere. That's how much damage each pellet does. The Incarnon quite literally shotguns an entire room. I mean, it was able to clear out an average of 367 enemies. Yeah. It handles really well in Incarnon, but the base form is still the Bronco. So I'm putting in the B tier because I don't like the Bronco. I really like the Incarnon. I wish it was easier to charge. If it was easier to charge, I would put it in B or A. But it's no. I don't like the Bronco. Um, if anyone wants to know reasons why I don't like the Bronco, it's a 4-shot pistol that you have to constantly reload. Kind of cumbersome to use. Back in the day, it was able to go like it would be the niche weapon that you would use to shoot at the big things with a pistol. But now it's kind of fallen by the wayside. And next up is the Lex. So in terms of base form, the Lex is like the big brother of the Lato. Single shell, pinpoint accurate, very slow fire rate. Like you're able to, it's a hand cannon. It's a literal hand cannon instead of a dinky pistol. And like it was something that a lot of people liked it in early Warframe. I wasn't the biggest fan of the Lex originally, but now with the Incarnons and the Incarnon adapter, I'm a big fan building it for this video. I'm now a big Lex fan. So this weapon now hits like a truck, and the Incarnon form, it hits so hard it sends like it isekais an entire room of people. They get isekai'd, like they get hit by a truck, right? They get sent to another world. They meet the men in the wall, and then they start their adventure. That's basically how it happens. Like, did anyone see that? Like, just look at these numbers. Exceptionally high crit rate, very easy to use, very easy to charge, massive, massive AoE, infinite body punch through, guaranteed impact proc. Only real con is that it has a really low fire rate. Yeah, so the Incarnon form is basically the Archiplasmor. The weapon is simply incredible. During testing, the Lex was able to send an average of 448 people to another world. This weapon is an easy and unexpected S for me. Because, like, that was effortless. Like, there's no contest with the Lex, with how strong it is. Next up is the Boltor. So, the Boltor was one of my favorite primaries before Damage 2.0. And I think it's coming back into the limelight. Its base form fires bolts that deal a pretty high amount of damage. Its Incarnon, a fully automated shotgun with 160 round magazine. Extremely high crit rate, high damage, high fire rate, easy to use, generous Incarnate ammo pool. It does suffer a little from success, but since it's not a shotgun, it's not as bad as the Felarx and Bronco. Um, it also has fairly high recoil. For a non AoE weapon, being able to nail an average of 410 enemies to the wall, that's staggering. It's getting an S, not an S, an A. It doesn't outperform the Lex by a wide margin, but it just feels real good to use. You know, high A, very high A. So the ceramic dagger, I'm not going to go too much into its numbers. I will bring it up, but it's the only weapon on the list that will be fully functional without any forma. Um, it's a very special case in this game because with your setup, you'll probably end up with about 100 permanent combo or to 120 permanent combo, and it's effectively always in Incarnon mode. Uh, to add icing on the cake, its heavy attacks are able to fire ranged projectiles with insanely high crit because of course you're going to go crit with a constant high combo. Um, the base reach is a little shallow, being a dagger, and I'm not a big, I'm not really into spamming heavy attacks with melee, so it's a little boring. So the caveat is that you need to acquire 100 primary weapon kills before having 100 base combo. And that only really resets when you complete a mission or you die. Um, yeah, so it doesn't need any forma. In testing, I still needed to get the first 100 primary weapon kills, but as like, but after that, I got 283 melee kills, even after requiring 100 kills to set up. Due to the ceramic dagger being such a special and usable weapon, it's easy A. Like if you don't like melee and like it's something special. It's definitely something special. Um, it's kind of like you don't like melee, it's okay. Just whip it out when you need it. Okay, next up is the fifth week. And oops, this will be the first one that covers all five of the weapons available. It's the Torid, the dual Toxicyst, the dual, what are they called? The dual Ichor, the Atomos, and the Miter. Okay, this is where my bias is going to come in. When the Torid was released, it was my favorite bad weapon to use. In fact, I used it religiously back when farming Zini on defense was a thing. Uh, I don't know if anyone remembers it. So it was introduced way back when clans were introduced, and basically it shoots out a toxic cloud that sticks onto the first surface it interacts with. Um, the Torid was my favorite weapon back then, and even though it was terrible, but now it's my favorite weapon for legitimate reasons too, instead of just causing problems with people. Uh, so remember the Angstrum? The Torid is a primary weapon that charges with just body shots, and it takes just 3 shots to do it. Doesn't matter where you are. Uh, it charges very easily. So it's a high damage projectile that leaves a stinky cloud that does damage over time and applies status. And then it charges in 3 shots and turns into a mix between the Tenet Cycron and the Kuvan Nucor. So it has a 40, I believe it's a 40 foot or 40 meter. Yeah, it fires a beam, right? That chains off of other enemies and causes an AoE cone between those enemies. It's a very, very, very flexible weapon. Massive damage output, insanely easy to charge, very high crit, body shot charge, chaining, cone AoE. Like, what? It struggles a little bit with tankier foes in its Incarnon form, but that's what the base form is for. And during those shots that you use to deal with a tanky foe, you've already instantly charged it again. You literally reload this gun by shooting someone. It's probably the Incarnon I've used the most since its release. It's easy to use, easy to mod. It does really well regardless of most of the game's content. It did score a little low in kills, but that's okay. It was able to melt 371 people. I mean, it's my list. And because of how easy to use, how it looks, how it feels, it's going in the S tier. In fact, it's going above the Lex because of how flexible it is. Okay. Next up, the Dual Toxicyst. The Dual Toxicyst was the talk of the town for a little while, with like an insane fire rate and being able to wipe out entire rooms rather easily. However, as you've probably seen, that's the same with almost every Incarnate out there. So, so how do I explain? So basically, the base form is a Dual Toxicyst. Very slow firing, single shot. It gets increased fire rate if you hit a headshot. So only gets better with an Incarnate, right? Yep. So remember the Lato? That's what the Incarnate is, except it's fully automatic now, and then with every headshot you get, the faster it fires. So let's go over the pros. Great crit, good damage, quick charge, very, very easy area clear, and a very generous Incarnate ammo pool. So what are the problems? What are the problems with such a weapon? It's that you got to use the Dual Toxicyst. Probably one of the worst feeling pistols in the game, or secondaries in the game. And the base form is abysmally slow. So unless you really enjoy the Dual Toxicyst, you don't need to force yourself to use this. The Incarnon is very, very good though. Very strong. But because it's the Dual Toxicyst, that's enough to drag it down. It's similar to the Bronco in that fact. I really, really don't like the Dual Toxicyst as a base weapon, even though it was able to get an average of 388 kills. It was able to blow those guys' minds out. Not a fan. Not a fan of the base form. Big fan of the Incarnate form. If they release just the Incarnate form, that would probably be an A or even an S for me. But not the base form. Whoops. Okay. Let's just cover all the weapons first. So let's go with the Atomos. The original beam pistol. For like the chaining beam pistol. It's a reliable and versatile weapon. With the Incarnon, makes it even better. For some reason, I found it really difficult to get headshots with this weapon. Probably just because I'm bad at games in general. And the Incarnon says it lobs explosive grenades, but it feels more like a rocket-propelled grenade than anything. It detonates on impact, and it devastates everything that it hits. High damage, good crit, good AoE. For me, the only real difficulty is that I had difficulty. I said difficulty so many times. I had problems landing headshots. It's reliable, it's flashy, and while testing the Atomos, it was able to atomize 423 enemies. So it lands in the A tier. So you've probably noticed that ease of use matters a lot to me, and flexibility matters a lot to me. So that's probably why some of these weapons are scoring way lower than some might expect. Next up is the Miter. So week 5, all of these weapons have a special place in my heart, except for the Dual Toxicyst. And the Ichor. I only started using the Ichor very, very recently. and that's more for fodder than anything. The Miter. Oh boy. I loved this weapon. I wanted it to be good so bad back in the day when it was first introduced. Um, it launches saw blades. You can charge them up for more damage. It's very easy to charge. The Incarnon, just like the Angstrum, fires seeking, bouncing projectiles. Except there are a couple more caveats. The seeking is way stronger on the Miter's Incarnon. It also explodes, dealing AoE damage. So it's way more reliable than the Angstrom. So, pros: massive damage, massive AoE, amazing seeking ability, high crit, can hit a single enemy multiple times with the same projectile, and it's very, very easy to charge, just requiring a couple of headshots. Um, the Incarnon ammo pool though is on the smaller side. Um, how do I put this? It is the only weapon that was able to acquire over 500 on average, with a high of like 670 kills in one mission. Like, I didn't even realize I was killing this many things. 553 is the average that this weapon was able to attain. That's over 100 kills a minute. I wasn't even trying with this weapon. Like, it just kind of happened. I just shot the Incarnate and the whole map died. Uh, Remember what I said about ease of use, right? It's getting an S. Like, it's no Torid, but dang, it's doing way more than I thought it would. I initially didn't like this weapon, but after some testing, probably single-handedly the hardest carrying weapon for horde shooting in all of the list. Here's a spoiler: there's nothing that outcompetes the Miter in terms of number of kills. Very well deserved S tier. Last for week 5 is the dual Ichor. Despite not liking melee, I really like the dual Ichor. You just do its combo and it leaves behind trails of toxic gas. Good damage, easy to combo with, very flashy. I mean, there's no real cons. If you like this weapon, this is the thing about melees. If you like the melee weapon, you use the melee weapon. I really like the dual Ichor. On average, 285 foes. It's okay. It's getting a B. I like the flavor. At least, it's not bad. Not bad. Okay. Week 6. The DE said that they'd fix the Soma. I don't think they fixed the Soma. I was never a big fan of the Soma. There was a big Soma fan train. Or, so the Incarnon adapter doesn't promote it to use crit. The Incarnon mode has very low crit. So, but the base weapon has very high crit. So, base form, fast firing rifle. Incarnon form, full auto shotgun. Where have we heard that before? Oh, right, the Boltor. No crit on this weapon, though. Not on the Incarnon. So, it's alright. It's reliable, good damage, easy to charge, generous Incarnate ammo pool. Doesn't do any AoE, doesn't do anything special. It's kind of plain Jane. This weapon was able to chew through an average of 311 foes. That's a B. And if I gotta choose, I would just go with the Boltor. Alright, the Burston. Lots of people like the Burston. Me, not so much. Not the base form, not the Incarnon. You how to explain it? You remember the Braton. You want a little bit of an upgrade. There's the Burston. It's like the Braton in almost every way, except it fires burst rounds instead of full automatic. Um, the Incarnon form is a full auto beam gun with a small AoE. It's a nice visual. It feels okay. It suffers from success, which is my biggest issue with it. Great damage, great crit, generous Incarnate ammo pool, small AoE, suffers from success, and AoE is, well, like the Bratons, is unreliably small. If you like the gun, you like the gun. For me, it's middle of the road. A lot of people like this weapon. It's kind of meh. I wouldn't go out of my way for it. If you got a build for it, go ahead. You got a build for it. I forgot to say which weapons I'll be covering. It would be the Soma, Burston, and Vasto, which I think, like, you know, this week is kind of suffering. So last one is the Vasto. Do any of you remember the scene from Indiana Jones where there's a guy whipping around scimitars and Indiana just kind of pulls out his pistol and goes blap, and just, I don't got time for this. Um, yeah, that's kind of what this weapon feels like. So the Vasto is a 6-shooter. It hits real hard, and its Incarnon basically lets you fan the hammer. It fires 6 rounds of a deadly shotgun spray, and it's another support weapon. But it feels really, really good to just turn around and blap someone. Especially, like, can you imagine? You have this tanky thing in front of you, and you just pull out your pistol, and you go, it's high noon. And then you just pump his face full of lead. That's kind of what the Vasto is there for. Very good theming, very good feel. So it has great damage, great crit, very, very reasonable charge rate. It's a big iron on your hip. So enough of the memes. So just like the Kunai, you gotta juggle its form, or not form, you gotta juggle between it and your primary weapon to maximize its output, because swapping to this weapon gives it a crit damage bonus and a crit rate bonus. As a result, it has lots of trouble with hordes. And it has an exceedingly and deceptively low Incarnate ammo pool. So if you take a look at this weapon's Incarnate ammo pool, you got to divide it by 6, because every time you click, it's going to be a 6-round burst of shotgun shells. And it's just going to paint whoever you shoot with red numbers. So the Vasto Incarnon, very strong. At least against single targets. Very niche. Able to one-shot almost every foe in the game. Almost. I almost am able to do it with what are they called? Archons? But like, it requires a little bit of more setup than just pulling out the Felarx. Like the Kunai, you need to swap this weapon to get a crit boost. I mean, you charge it, you start using your primary, you see something you don't like, you pull it out, you shoot it. That's basically how it works. During testing, it was able to get an average of 218. So it's a very niche weapon, like the Kunai and the Felarx. The flavor is really there, so it's, once again, love the weapon to death, but it can't go any higher than C. All right. This is the last one. The last week, being week 7, is the stalker weapons and the hard to obtain weapons. So there's a couple problems with that I'll highlight here, but let's see. We're going to go through the dread, the despair, the hate, and the Zylok. So, back in the beginning, I'm saying that this is for generic use only. I don't intend to use all of these weapons in conjunction, so I'm not going to be using that buff that requires me to have all 3 weapons together. That being said, I'm going to be talking about these weapons, how they handle by themselves and individually, and how good or bad I feel they are. And this is my list. So, um, the Dread is a slash damage Paris. The Paris was already good, so you know this is going to be great. It has high damage, high slashing damage. It's a very good weapon. The Incarnon is just like the Paris. It fires wide blade beams, and it can do millions of damage. It's a very solid piece of kit. Great crit, great damage, great AoE, very easy to charge. Real con is low Incarnon ammo pool. Very good weapon, just like the Paris. Um, During testing, it was able to cleave through an average of 405 kills or enemies. Very easy A. Not much to talk about here. I'm going to put it ahead of the Paris. You know what? I actually want to use the Dread more than I want to use the Paris. Like everything beyond the Atomos are weapons that I actively want to use. So, the Despair. If you, why are the thrown weapons? Why are these secondary weapons? A lot of them are so good. They feel so good to use. So it has fast fire rate, fast reload. Its Incarnon lets you paint an area. After a delayed period of time, it explodes. It wipes out the whole room. Um, High crit, high damage, great AoE. It's really fast to charge. Almost like it's basically the whole room explodes. You throw a bunch of daggers at some guy, the whole room explodes again. The ammo pool is relatively low. And here's the biggest issue with this weapon, it's a rare stalker drop. It's very difficult to come across unless you've been playing this game for a long time or you got the platinum to buy it. The Despair is a very solid damage dealer. During testing, it was able to warp an average of 395 enemies out of existence. But the weapon is very rare and very difficult to get your hands on intentionally. In spite of that, because I didn't need to farm this weapon, I just had it. I'm just, you know, it's just gonna go into the A. It's like I like using it. I like whipping it out from time to time. It's like, yeah, it does damage. It That's all I can really say about it. The hate. What's there to say? It's a melee weapon, and its incarnate form fires delayed explosions that you are not affected by anymore. You used to be, but from what can understand, it no longer knocks you back. So easy to use, no self knockback. Real con is that it's another rare drop from the Stalker. Uh, Once again, not the biggest melee guy. Very interesting weapon. On average, was able to cut up 254 foes. It's going in the B tier, but once again, very, very difficult to get your hands on. So, Zylok, a very unique pistol. You gotta wait for Barricadier to show up with it in his inventory to get it. Um, it has duplex fire, so what that means is when you click, it shoots. When you release, it shoots. So it can shoot real fast. The Incarnon is a charged laser. And kind of like the what was it called? Opticore? Yeah, that's what it was. The mining laser. But it feels real. Like, the Zylok is one of those weapons you kind of want to cheese with when you have a Warframe with a secondary um, exalted weapon with its augment, right? You shoot a Eximus with it in the head, Then you get Xmas advantage, and then you get to do a bunch of extra damage. But on its own, I'm like, okay, let's start with the positives. It's easy to charge, good AoE, good crit. Cons: only obtainable from Barricatier nowadays. And it's clunky as hell to use. If you like this weapon, you like this weapon. I'm not going to say anything about that. If it works for you, it works for you. It doesn't work for me. So I'm going to be honest. Don't like it. It doesn't have a niche outside of Xmas Advantage, and that doesn't even really show up here. And I don't like the base form. I don't like the Incarnon. On average, it also performed quite poorly. Trust me, I did my best with this weapon. On average, 248 kills. This is the only F that's going to be on this tier list, as it just outright flunks everything else. Feels bad, doesn't do anything particularly well. I don't know what else to say. So, what else is there? Well, if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Once again, if you have any agreements or disagreements or special builds you want to share with me, by all means. I love reading your comments. Next, I'll be doing something similar for each of the bosses in Warframe. No special videos. I'm just going to make a tier list and complain about all of them. So if that's what you want to hear, anyways, if you made it this far, thank you. If it wouldn't hurt if you like, commented, or subscribed, or did all three. Honestly, I feel like this video is and this concept was quite cursed, considering it took me so long to put it out. But here we are. So, I stream every Monday, doing all of the weeklies in Warframe, soloing the Archons. But if you want to join in or need some help with any of the game's content, feel free to shoot me a message. Anyways, yeah, thanks for watching, and that's all for now.